So my question is to Kalevi. So do we need the term beauty in biosemiotics if beauty is species specific and it is never achievable in the in terms of perfect semiotic fittedness because it is so multidimensional? So why shouldn't we use Christopher Alexander notion of universals of adaptive forms, something like that?
In a way, this is a terminological question, of course, but I just think that temporarily using here the term beauty would maybe help us to see more interesting links, and maybe later when that the whole theory will become more elaborated, we will use more neutral terms.
Thank you.
Let's see, who was next? Yamin? Jamin? You're muted.
I think Philip was next.
Oh, sorry, Philip, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So I would like to ask participants of the last session, or also to others, what do they think about Darwinian concept of sexual selection? Because, like, if I compare it to most of the talks and debates I have heard today, I would say it's more inclusive to animals, like in terms of aesthetics. So Darwin would say that, for example, in courtship of peacocks, they are selecting not the fit individuals, but the beautiful individuals. So I would just like to hear feedback on this. Like for Darwin, there would be really like a continuum between non-humans and humans in terms of having a sense of beauty.
Mm-hmm.
My brief answer was that simply that's not beauty. What is the object in case of sexual selection?
But it would be aesthetics, Kalevi.
No.
Why not? Because, no. For example, with semiotic fitting, you said it's a process in biological communities. So, like, if there is interaction of peacocks in some contexts, like courtship, so you could also say this is semiotic fitting and there is aesthetic going on.
I would simply say that's too little of that semiotic fitting in order to take that example as anything special. Rather, I think this is just a very decontextualized aspects there, what are chosen, and so that's no. I think in order to understand first, just better to forget this this example. But Portman is the right one to go.
It's interesting, in the chat, Kalevi, there was a quote from Gregory about how it's actually one of his definitions of ecology, where he's talking about how organisms never have just one purpose. Mm-hmm. The antlers on the deer have they attract the female deer. They show the ability to fight to the other male deers. They are, when they scratch on the bark, they make it possible for particular insects to be there. When they fall on the ground, they provide home for other things, so that whatever it is in a multi-contextual relational process. And that nature never does one thing at a time. And so I just think that ties in here to this idea of the aesthetic being that possibility for perceiving relational, relationing. Anyway, I think, Yamin, you were next, right?
Okay, yes, thank you. Thanks so much, Kalevi. Really an exciting presentation with a lot to follow up on. I would like to follow up on your brave definition, which I was glad to see included fittedness, which you're developing. I wonder what you would think about modifying it just slightly to beauty is the feeling of perfect semiotic fittedness. And one elegant reason for doing that might be the nature of fittedness mapped on to diagrams. Diagrams, types, and tokens are, as we know, part of iconic relations. And what we oftentimes miss is their interrelationship with tones, that we never get. You never get an icon type or an icon token without an icon tone, the tone being the qualisign that makes everything else matter. And when we're talking about fittedness, we're talking about aspects of feeling and desire that factor into aesthetic judgment that is very experiential. So I wonder what you'd think about modifying the definition in that way.
I think that this, when already saying semiotic there, in Persian sense, that semiotic in this general sense, as you just are referring, cannot go without feeling. So in that sense, I don't think it adds anything.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether it was Gary or Stephen next. Is that
Stephen, you go ahead.
Wait, unmute, and now thank you. So one of the, one thing that came to me during these talks is that we have a two phases of a cycle, which isn't really a cycle because it's all one thing. In ordinary language, we have the word aesthetics, which usually refers to the passive perception of art or beauty. And we have art making, which is the active making. And obviously they're constantly interacting in every one of us. Gregory Bateson was told by his father that a Bateson could be a scientist, not an artist, that somehow being an artist was too lofty or challenging or in the realm beyond. William Bateson was a huge appreciator and collector of art, but this had tragic consequences for Gregory's brothers, Martin, and Gregory, by the end of his life, had really overcome this duality. And here, of course, we have Nora Bateson, who couldn't care less whether we're talking about aesthetics or art or making or perceiving, because it's all one activity. So for us as creatures, and perhaps for our interactions with other creatures, I'm not sure if that dichotomy really exists. We tend to talk about aesthetics if we're scientists, because we like to place ourselves on the passive or perceiving end of that equation. But I've recently had experience playing duets with dogs, and it's a two-way experience. You can't, of course, you cannot define in words what another living creature is experiencing, but you know that something is happening, and it is an exchange across a medium, which is not words. We have the bowerbirds who create these incredibly elaborate things where, I don't know if you want to call it sculpture or architecture. It's a combination, a multimodal combination of architecture, sculpture, dance, painting, theater that the bowerbirds perform for each other. that may take weeks to construct. And supposedly it has a sexual selection function. But then there's all the male bowerbirds who make the bowers, and they're never selected by a female, but they still spend weeks making these bowers. And when you see films of the bowerbirds, the sexual activity takes like 1/10 of a second. And the making of the bowerbird takes weeks of continuous activity. So to say that art making or aesthetic activity is somehow subservient to this overall purpose of evolutionary, it's just about who's going to get the genes passed on. It just doesn't compute with those of us who are living creatures who engage in this activity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gary.
So I put this in the chat. Beauty may be relative to context in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. But there may be perhaps some more generalizable features of beauty. And when in doubt, I often will turn to Charles Sanders Peirce for some guidance. And Peirce, talked about aesthetics, and he talked about aesthetics in terms of the growth of concrete reasonableness, which is a process. It's not a thing. It's not a feature. It's a process whereby there is a growth of knowledge integrated with love, right? And so I threw there's just a wonderful quote from Peirce that I really do need to read in this context. What he adores, if he is a good pragmaticist, is power, but not the sham power of brute force, which even in its own specialty of spoiling things, secures such slight results, but the creative power of reasonableness, which subdues all other powers and rules over them with its scepter, knowledge, and its globe, love. I think that's a statement to be considered carefully. I think that the integration of reason and logic together with empathy and concern for the other is a balance that we ought to think about seeking out, and perhaps the growth of concrete reasonableness will bring us to better places. Just a thought to consider.
Okay. I think Dawn or Tori, I'm not sure which one of you. Tori, are you next?
It's almost Dawn's bedtime, so maybe you better go
Yeah,
first.
okay. Let's get him while he's awake. I think it's way past his bedtime.
Tori, you know me how many years? I am the last guy out of the bar. As long as there's a gatherings, I'm it's about going on 2 now. I'll just be very, very quick because my goal is to understand Kalevi in this case. And I kind of, if I'm hearing Kalevi right, it's not even so much about perception and liking and things like this. Like so many times when I hear Kalevi, my first instinct is absolutely no, that's not right. That's not right. And then oh yeah, it's right than I thought it was. So let me check my understanding with you, Kalevi. When you said that to be beautiful is to eliminate incompatibilities and not assimilate contradictions, I thought, oh my God, that's horrible. Am I beautiful if I go around eliminating contradictions and not assimilating incompatibilities? But then again, kind of in Gary's sense, I'm thinking, okay, if the idea is to exert my power to literally remove that which is incompatible to me, yes, that's not beautiful. That's not increasing the harmony. If I change myself to make myself compatible with surrounds, right, that I'm adding fittedness to the world, right, or any organism would be. So in this sense, the organisms that are making themselves compatible with things that may originally be incompatible or contradictory, then that is an act of fitting. So my question to you is the increase of harmony within an ecosystem beautiful? It seems that way to us. The increase of harmony within a social system seems beautiful. But is harmony itself the value, the making more compatible among all the interaction organisms rather than less? Is this kind of what you're thinking about when you're talking about semiotic fittedness?
Here more or less I think, but it depends on now again what is exactly harmony, but something like this I think, yeah.
But harmony again would be compatibility, finding a way to make these things work together, establishing contrapuntal duets.
When systems complexity grows, but not deterministically, but say via search and find and problem solving. So what is going on then? So that process, what is going on when a community becomes older and older and older, I mean, ecosystem. So at the same time, richer and richer and more fine-tuned links between their members. So more and more full cycles of life can be embedded there. So everything fits so well, like in an old forest. So what's that? Say that process towards say early successional phase when you put the same species there, half of them are gone in next year. So because the whole process takes time. So that's I think that's a model example. Now whether what's growing there is beauty. That's now, of course, maybe terminological question, but I do think it is more or less like what we understand by it, or harmony.
Great.
Yeah, Tori.
I'll try to say this in half a minute. I don't talk much about beauty, although I discuss art all the time. And it's very contentious, and people assume that you're being prescriptive whenever you describe, what goes into something that's beautiful. It is pattern, formation, it is balance, it is harmony. But what I do talk about is what is art, not what is beautiful, what makes something artistic. And to give an example, Rembrandt's painting of a lighthouse, of course, of a, not lighthouse, but a windmill. There's much technique there, much understanding of color theory and perspective and so forth, which make the painting beautiful. But what makes it artistic is the fact that it's lit similarly to the way that he lights his portraits, with a glow on the face. It's upright, so it seems like a human figure, and it has its arms are at a cross, which makes it seem like, the Christ cross or something like that. So in addition to all these beautiful elements, there is this, that means something. It stands for something else. It's pointing to something else. And so I think for artistic things, it's, yes, it has to be beautiful, of course, but then it has to do this other thing. And I'll also note that in terms of beauty, like I study butterfly wing patterns, and they are, everybody says how beautiful they are and so forth, but more likely, and this is the same is true with beetles, is that's a case when selection is not working. And nature is allowed to express the full range of structural patterns that is available to butterfly wing patterns, because they aren't serving a purpose of reproductive fitness. And that's why you have such a diversity in the number of butterfly patterns that are out there. So that's to counter the idea that beauty is fitness. That's all I'll say.
Thank you. And I believe, Mark, that you're next.
Hi there. Yeah. I've been interested in the aesthetic of landscape for about 30 years. And I can recommend a book by Ronald Hepburn called Wonder. Now, I find landscape beautiful and aesthetically it has qualities. And I believe that animals also find beauty in landscape. And I observe this, say, in the flight of birds that seem to just glide for the pleasure of it and things like this. I was wondering what it is about landscape that might provide the aesthetic for animals and how this connects with the experience of animals in captivity. And perhaps how does this relate to Kalevi's ideas?
The aesthetic quality, according to my understanding, it is, say, polysemios. So that means many meaningful relations. So, and that is now also what's different between the animal in captivity and in the wild. So, the meaningful richness of meaningfulness is just much lower than in captivity, anyhow, and that's that also.
So yes, you're saying that there's a lack of richness in the captive environment, and I was wondering what it is about the landscape that has richness. Is it just purely the variety of color and movement and contrast and things like that? It's purely physiological, but then one can also talk about the internal physiology of the animal and how it relates to the experientially.
No, so many more patterns to be connected to, so many more patterns to recognize and to be linked. That's the difference.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yağmur?
Kalevi, I somewhat would like to have the dynamic aspect in that. So harmony, okay, there's a harmony between what and what. Actually, when I think of harmony in the context of aesthetics, it's not the harmony within the aesthetic object or the particular living being that comes to the fore in my mind, but the harmony between the perceiver, the observer, and the beautiful entity. And this is, for me, a snapshot of a dynamic process, actually. And it is actually a dance of expectation and encounter. So when these two match, I suppose we have this situation of aesthetics. How would you comment on that?
You're absolutely right, of course, because any semiotic relation is dynamic relation. So therefore, to think about just a passive form, we cannot say whether this is beautiful or not without the process in which it is involved. So
what would you say about the expectation? What would you say about the expectation? Which I'd say, use metaphorically, of course, somewhat in a more humanistic term.
I don't know what to say.
Oh, okay. So we discuss it later then.
I think it's a beautiful discussion, and